Good morning, guys. It's the Daywalker Reporter here again today. What appeals to me as an individual? What formulates my opinion about media? Now, I'm going to say this right now. My opinion about shows, my opinion about anything is subjective. It's the same with any person who's consumed anything. There's a lot of different factors that can dictate whether or not someone can enjoy a show, whether or not someone can enjoy media. There's a lot of different things that play into that, right? It comes down to who that person views as a critical authority. And what I mean by critical authority, I mean those type of people who have experience in a particular medium or in the consumption of a particular medium to the point where their opinion is held at this level that far exceeds the majority of people. Why? Because they've spent a lot of time viewing that media. Now, that person's opinion is important, but so is the opinion of somebody who is brand new to that medium. For example, I would say that there's media that has widespread appeal, and then there's media that's a lot more niche. Now, what separates these two is that, is in the title of these two things. You got some media that a lot of people can watch and enjoy regardless of who they are, where they came from, because human beings, while we do vary to a significant degree, we have some like common core things that we can relate to, unless you're somebody who's on like the fringes of society. And that's where sort of niche media comes in. But niche media isn't synonymous with having morality that's on the fringes. Sometimes niche media can be just appeal to people who have been consuming stuff for so long to the point where they have a very specific and particular taste. And that very specific and particular taste dictates whether or not they're going to like something or whether or not they're going to dislike something. For example, if you take someone like Paul from the Great British Baking Show and you separate, you can separate him from the vast majority of people who probably consume baked goods, because Paul has spent a lot of time not only making baked goods, but consuming baked goods. And these baked goods are baked under certain circumstances, and he understands the rules behind baking things, but those rules only operate to be able to specifically categorize those foods into very specific sort of dynamics. For example, patisseries or meringues, or, the difference between a sponge and a cake, the difference between sort of cheesecake and a tart. These things are very specific. And Paul, in essence, has a very database style mind, because he keeps track inside of his own mind of this massive history of, baked goods, and whether or not someone is following through with the quality of those baked goods. And in the case of baking, it comes down to specifically the amount of consumption and the sort of rule sets that follow those baked goods. So if you have somebody like Paul, right? Paul's not going to sit down here and eat a random brownie from Kroger. Now, does that mean that brownie from Kroger is bad? No, not necessarily. It just means that a majority of people, or not even a majority of people, but people within a certain population who predominantly have exposure to that kind of brownie, and they, you got a brownie from Wayfield, and then you got a brownie from Kroger, then some people are going to like the brownie from Kroger better. Some people are going to like the brownie from Wayfield better. And some people may be able to explain why one is better than the other. They might say, okay, one is a lot more creamy than the other. One is a lot more firm and a little bit grainy. In the words of Paul, it would be like, okay, one is overcooked, one is undercooked. But these people have a completely different way of defining those things. And So they have a completely different paradigm that's informing whether or not they view media as good or not, right? And this same thing applies to film and anime and manga, because you got the people who are the otaku old guard, people who have been watching anime since the 80s, who have watched basically almost every show that has ever been released stateside, and even have watched stuff that's been released in Japan and are caught up on things that are released in Japan because they've been watching anime for so long. Some of them have learned Japanese, some of them have become translators, and so their knowledge base about the medium is so extensive, so vast, that their enjoyment of it is going to be very specific. It's going to fall within a certain criteria. And also, if you're somebody who studies a lot of film, if you're somebody who writes a lot and writes under a certain paradigm to judge your writing, that will ultimately judge how you make sort of your opinions about other media. You know what I'm saying? And I touched on this before in my reviewer versus curator video. Definitely check that video out. It's not necessarily my best video, but it kind of touches on this theme of the idea that, you know, there are different, like the Western paradigm versus the Eastern paradigm when it comes to sort of storytelling and the existence of antagonists and protagonists and what roles that they serve, what changes they are meant to serve in the narrative. I said serve twice, but that's besides the point. Like it serves. I mean, it goes into sort of talking about those dynamics, you know, and depending on which paradigm, and it's not so strictly binaristic like that, because if you're somebody who studies different paradigms of narratives, it allows you to appreciate more styles of stories, and it allows you to be able to expand your horizon and what you can appreciate in media. So like, it's like the more you become accustomed to what you're doing, the more of sort of a master of whatever type of craft, whatever type of interest you're into, the more you learn about it, the sort of less relatable you become, because you can't relate to the common consensus or the most popular opinions about particular shows. You can appreciate those shows, but it's not like you're gonna actually like them to the degree that, like, say, your average viewer of media would like. I would give like an example of film very obviously. Like, I'm someone who likes a lot of action, spectacle stuff in animation. Now, I don't necessarily like action above all other genres. I would have to say that my favorite genre is meta textual commentary. I like shows that basically reward you for watching other shows, that make everything full, that bring everything full circle, that make you feel like, okay, I consumed a lot of media, because I like to keep track of every show that I watch. I like to keep track of the amount of episodes I've watched in a show, or not just a show, but I like to keep track of a lot of different movies that I watch. I like to list them out and stuff like that. I don't know. It's just very interesting to me to just sort of chart my history of the consumption of media, because I don't passively consume media. A lot of the media I consume, I'm very active. I'm having a conversation with myself. I'm taking notes in my mind. But I like stuff like that. Now, when it comes to action, I like action, but for me, when it comes to action, it has to be an extreme spectacle. It has to blow my mind so much to the point where I can't perceive of another way of viewing this particular situation. For example, if I were to look at sword fights, right? If I were to look at battles, if I were to look at stuff like that, I feel like anime kind of does a lot of things that can be done in live action when it comes to action itself, right? If I were to sit down and watch a versus fight of two sword fighters, I would go instantly to Sword of the Stranger. The final fight in Sword of the Stranger instantly blows every other sword fight I've ever seen out the water. You know, one of the best action scenes in a live action film, or like, you know, sort of weapon-based fighting, was in Ninja Assassin. But the reason why that fight was so incredible was that they used some image optimization. They used some sort of CGI effects to sort of add to the scene, which is a form of animation. But that sort of a stranger fight just basically just blows everything out of the water because of the camera angles that they achieve in that fight that far supersede any camera angle you could do in live action, with the fact that the sort of visceral experience of each and every blow is a lot more enhanced because of the fact that, unlike in live action, you know that these characters who are in these films, or these people who are in these films, aren't actually getting hurt. Like, there's an illusion that they're getting hurt, and the actor has to sell you on the idea that they're getting hurt, but they're not actually getting hurt. Now, with animated characters, they actually are experiencing that. Now, I explained the fact that these characters aren't real, but sometimes it's a lot more difficult to tell whether or not these dynamics and characters are real, because the animators and the voice actors and the sound design people put so much effort into depicting the scene to the point where it's nigh near perfect how they sort of bring out those sort of emotions in the audience. So that's what I'm looking for in action. I need very interesting and sweeping camera angles. You know, two animators that are very common for doing this, or I could say three animators that I think are like sort of the masters of action animation, at least in anime, are like, you know, Yutaka Nakamura. I remember the other guy's name is Kazuto, and Yoshimichi Kameda. And sort of Kameda is like, if anybody saw the first episode of One Punch Man and they saw the scene where all the giant dudes were attacking Saitama, and then you had like sort of like the very thick and bold lines, the very thick and bold brush-like line work. If anybody is a fan of Fullmetal Alchemist and you look at the scene when Roy Mustang is basically wailing on Envy with his flames, that scene, the fact that you have this sort of brushstroke style, one of the things that makes that freaking amazing is the fact that you have sort of the pose-to-pose extremities that really bring to life the animation. And the fact that the poses are so dynamic, and the fact that the brushwork of the actual Sumi pens really like make you feel the visceral action. And like, I also like animators who like sort of, when the intensity shots happen, and they're able to time this perfectly, when the intensity shots happen, they like switch it to black and white, and it's freaking incredible. Another really good animator, there's a lot of really good animators. Yo-Yo Shinari, very good animator. And there's a bunch of other animators that I might have to do an entire video to separately to be able to bring to life all of my favorite things about sort of action anime. Oh, and Takeshi Koike, if anybody ever seen Afro Samurai, ever seen Red Line, ever seen sort of the Lupin the Third films, that guy is incredible, right? So you got sort of action. So what I'm looking for in action, you know, oh yeah, Kazuto Nakazawa, that's the name of the guy who I forgot, who did like stuff like, he worked on Bebop, and he worked on Shampoo. He was a major animator on some of the best episodes of Shampoo, and he did the best action scene in Be the Beginning of the third episode. That guy was really good. So yeah, great just great action animation. You know, like I said before, dynamic camera angles and stuff like that. Now, when it comes to stuff that doesn't necessarily fall in the realm of action, I stated this before that I like metatextual commentary, but not just that. I do like stuff with strong narratives. Like, I do like stuff where the stories make sense and you have a lot of different characters playing different roles in the narrative. But my slant is a little bit less towards that compared to before. When I was younger, I was a huge fan of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, Legend of the Galactic Heroes. I was a big fan of shows like that. You know, just series with long form narratives that span across multiple episodes, a lot of episodes that kind of sort of are very good at telling a gripping and compelling story. But now it's not necessarily that I'm 100% interested in something that tells like the best story ever. Like right now, I'm starting to realize that I'm more interested in sort of shows that are able to grip me in a variety of different ways. Shows that don't use the conventional methods in order to grip me, you know, in order to get me invested. Like, for example, one of my favorite manga, and probably my favorite manga right now, is Dorohedoro. Dorohedoro is so wacky and out there. It's something that sort of goes outside of the norm of what would be considered as like a really like good narrative. It has those elements in there, but it's not prioritized. What's prioritized, I feel, in Dorohedoro is this sort of grungy, dark aesthetic with these, and it's more so about seeing these characters with very wacky and strange personalities interact with each other, which is one of the best things you can watch inside of a show. That's one of the things that stand out about me, and you know, that's one of the things that like shows like Bake, you know, even like not Barakamon. What's the series that I really like, where you have like a lot of sort of like tropey-esque characters? You know, Eizouken that just recently came out. I love the meta in that show. I love the fact that it's basically a show that's talking about the production of other shows. I love that it's extremely relatable on a variety of different levels, being a creator. You know, I like that it just makes me feel good that I spent all this time reading stuff. I spent all this time watching stuff, you know? So yeah, in essence, that's kind of the shows that sort of appeal to me. The last thing that I have to say that's like one of the like sort of pillars of my taste is definitely aesthetic. Aesthetic can make or break a show for me. Like how a show looks is incredibly important because you need, for example, you have a lot of anime that are adaptations of manga. You have a lot of anime that are competing in the market with other shows that are of the same ilk. If you have stuff like that, the shows that you're watching, at least in my opinion, have to justify their existence on multiple levels. And not only justify their existence on multiple levels, but they have to justify their existence in animation. That means that these shows need to optimize on the audio-visual experience. And if a show fails to do that, especially if it's a manga adaptation, then the anime is kind of pointless. It exists for like, for me, at least in my opinion, it exists for no reason other than to like get people to read the manga or to garner more popularity for the original creator. For example, one of the two shows that came out last year that I felt just paled in comparison to the manga were Kimetsu no Yaiba and Vinland Saga. Now, a lot of people would say, what the heck, Kimetsu no Yaiba? Kimetsu no Yaiba looked amazing. In the animated segments, there were a couple animated segments that were pretty good. Some of the animated segments that I thought were kind of like sort of a mixed media nightmare, especially in the episode with the sort of shifting room. It didn't necessarily appeal to me. I didn't really like it all that much. The only episode that had a good fight to me was the episode that went crazy on Twitter. And, I'll give the show that. But besides that, sort of the background moving, how the backgrounds moved, how the characters were drawn, it worked, but it just didn't have the same feeling and the same design sense of sort of that black and white visceral experience of the manga. And the same thing goes with Vinland Saga. Vinland Saga's art in the manga is some of the best manga art I've ever read. Now, that's under contention because, like I said before, there's a certain opinion that I have, but it's the perfect combination of realism and sort of the anime aesthetic, and it just sort of blends it very, very well, and it lends itself very nicely. When you're reading it page to page, the action sequences in the manga far supersede that of the anime. Now the anime does do a really good job on the action sequences. It has a lot of really good camera angles and shots and stuff like that. But it just doesn't compare. You know, it just really does not compare. Especially when you're utilizing CGI soldiers, when you have moments when the backgrounds look good, but then otherwise they only look good if they're on a static scene, and then you have CGI water, and then you have like sort of these segments where like they're supposed to be high octane action, high impact moments. But like it's always like for me, it's always in the detail. If you got the dialogue scenes and and the cameras are very much like moving manga, where it's basically borrowed manga panels, and over the borrowed manga panels, you have characters talking. You know, it's you know, it's not as much worth it. Now the soundtrack was pretty good. The audio visual experience was okay. But I just feel like compared to the manga, it just doesn't necessarily lend itself or justify its own existence. Now, one anime that did justify its existence was Hunter x Hunter 2011, because in the Hunter x Hunter 2011 series, they basically go completely insane for 148 episodes, and I feel like it's one of the most solidly done shonen adaptations ever, because they take the manga and they make it better in a lot of different ways, from the audio-visual experience to the way that the chronological order of events are handled, to in the Chimera Ant, the inclusion of the narrator that really brought to life the series. But yeah, this video is getting a little bit too long. This is probably like my longest video, but yeah, when you're watching my videos, just know that everything that I'm saying is my own opinion, but that opinion is a very informed opinion. So you can choose to respect it, you can choose not to respect it. It's all up to you. But yeah, and your opinion is just as valid as mine, and I respect your opinion just as much as I care about my own. But yeah. Write in the comments below what appeals to you. This is a 23-minute video. Watch this video in increments if you can. Peace.